This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Born in 1872, Rudolf Weber was an Austrian artist known for his beautiful landscapes and bucolic images of village life. And while he was widely regarded as a talented painter with a discerning eye, his paintings never fetched much notoriety or high prices, as they were mostly viewed as decorative and nostalgic. But for the owners of this painting, those two things are not deficits. In fact, they are the precise reason this painting is important to them. Owned by their grandparents for years and omnipresent during visits and holidays, this painting triggers nostalgia for that relationship. It brings back all of those warm memories. And unfortunately, during a move, this painting suffered a massive impact, tearing it into pieces and almost shredding the canvas. The tears run both with the warp and weft of the canvas, horizontally and vertically, through the entire image. And while tears were the result, tears soon followed. But now it's up to me to remove those tears and wipe away those tears. Hey folks, so before we get into today's project, I want to talk about the sponsor of the video, which of course is Squarespace. Which, when you think about it, is kind of strange because they're a digital company focused on website creation and I'm an analog fine art conservator. So it kind of seems odd that they'd want to be involved with me. I mean, all the work that I do is behind the scenes and in honor of somebody else's vision, the artist, of course. But when you think about it, all of the work Squarespace does is behind the scenes too. All of their super tech is completely invisible. And they're also working in honor of somebody else's vision, yours, be it your business, your artwork, or just your personal hobby. So it begs the question, are we the same? So by now, most of you know about Squarespace and how they have thousands upon thousands of beautiful mobile-friendly templates for you to use however you see fit, from portfolios to blogs or to running your own business. They've got something for you. With search engine optimization, analytics, plugins for social media, mobile editing, and a new Squarespace video app so that you can create dynamic content. But did you know how much they help all of the creators who are in their ecosystem? They have a really powerful help center with resources from simple to complex to make sure that any question you have doesn't go unanswered. And if that's not enough for you, well, they have webinars where you can watch Squarespace pros put into action what you want to do. And if that's not enough, there is a community forum where you can ask questions of people just like you and get specific answers, once again, so that you're not left stranded. And if that wasn't enough, you can always reach out to Squarespace and get in touch with a real live human for assistance. Once again, proving that though they're behind the scenes, they are working tirelessly to uphold and honor your vision. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Baumgartner to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So I get why Squarespace is a sponsor. I mean, that, or somebody over there really likes dad jokes and mediocre puns. In order to address these massive tears, I need to first separate this canvas from its stretcher support, and this is done by removing these little nails. These are ring shank nails. You can see those rings on the shank, hence the name, and these are really difficult to remove because those shanks hold on to the wood when the nails are driven in. This is different than a standard artist's tack or upholstery tack, which doesn't have those rings on the shank, making it much easier to remove if necessary. Nonetheless, I am able to remove all of these tacks, and then I'm going to flip this painting so that I can remove the stretcher from the back, as well as these pieces of board that were put in to prevent this canvas from flopping around during transportation. Lifting off the stretcher isn't terribly difficult, but it's a slow process just in case an errant tack or nail or even staple remains that I didn't catch upon my first pass. At this point, I'm going to clean off the back, and this is just to remove the accumulated grime. This painting is over 100 years old, and I want to make sure that none of the debris that's settled in between the stretcher bar and the canvas is present when I take it back to the back half of the studio for the first treatment on the hot table, which will relax and flatten the waves and distortions in the canvas that were a result of storage and handling during the years of debate about what to do with this painting. Unfortunately, the painting wasn't brought to me right away. It sat under beds, in closets, and in storage while the owners debated whether or not it was worth keeping. But luckily, they did settle on the fact that it was important to them, and preserving it was the right course of action. Yes, things can be replaced. We know that things do not define us, and that they are not really all that important. But when a thing takes on meaning because it becomes an avatar for a person, a memory, or a place, well, then it's not replaceable. And simply letting it go can result in the loss of the emotion or feeling that's triggered when we see it or experience it. And for these clients, they recognized that and ultimately decided to go ahead with the conservation of this piece, though it was a big expense and a big risk to them. Once the painting has been flattened by way of heat, moisture, and pressure on my large heated vacuum table, I'll transfer the acid-free blotter paper to which it's resting on over to a sheet of drywall. I'll flip it, then put some felt on the face to protect the impasto or texture of the painting, and let it rest under weight for a couple of days. I want the painting to lose all of its moisture and acclimatize to the studio. And if done correctly, we can see that all of those distortions are now removed and the painting is flat. We're far, far away from being completed, but the next step is to prepare the interleaf for the lining. Because this painting has massive tears, there is no easy way to fix this, and we certainly can't try to fix it locally because those local repairs just won't hold. Not only are these tears too large for local repairs, but the canvas is too brittle. And one of my responsibilities is to make sure that whatever I do results in the painting leaving my studio in better condition than it arrived for as long as possible. But before I can do the lining, I have to treat these tears because I don't want the canvas moving or further distorting. And I do that by tearing off some little strips of Japanese paper. This is mulberry or washi kozo. And I'm going to tear off just about 1/4 of an inch thick strips. And then, once I have enough of them, I'm going to bond them down to the canvas. And this is going to stabilize that canvas so that it doesn't move, shift, or distort. I'm using an archival adhesive here, and this can be removed if necessary. At this point, I don't understand how or why somebody would rationalize removing this repair, but that's not for me to judge. My job is just to make sure that what I do can be removed. So in the future, if there's a better technique or the painting is damaged again and needs more conservation, my work can be undone without risking harm to the conservator or the artwork. Once I've embedded this little piece of paper in the glue, I'll come back with another layer of glue on top and make sure it's really pressed into that canvas weave. I want it to really mirror the canvas weave and not just sit on the surface. Once the glue has started to set up, I'll bring some release film, some felt, and a weight to press it while it dries. And then I can continue on with the rest of the reinforcement. Throughout the tear, putting the paper on and then pressing it, and then leaving it for a couple of days to rest. Now, there are many ways to address a tear that is this large. The painting could be simply lined to a new canvas, the soft lining, but ultimately the movement of the canvases, the original and the new canvas, with humidity changes, would cause stress on this tear, and eventually it would open up or lift up and we would start to see it again, and that would be considered a failure, and it would have to be redone. So that's why I'm choosing the interleaf process, which relies on a rigid interleaf in between the old canvas and the new canvas to not only immobilize the new and the old canvases, but also to provide something rigid that won't deflect for the new canvas to bond to. in the past, different adhesives have been used: rabbit skin glue paste, wax resin, and all sorts of synthetics. And I, in my studio, prefer to use synthetic adhesives designed for conservation by conservators and chemists to be archival and fully reversible. One of the drawbacks to this adhesive, however, is that it's flexible. At least in this case, it's a drawback. Sometimes we do want the flexibility of this adhesive, but here we don't. And that's another reason for using the interleaf. It compensates for this adhesive's flexibility. I'll roll on this adhesive while it's hot onto a sheet of flat spun nylon gossamer. And I choose to put this gossamer on anytime the tears are really massive because it's a little bit of extra support and insurance. Think of it as belt and suspenders. And because this canvas is so compromised, I think that that's a valid choice and one that's worked for me for over 25 years. The PET film, the interleaf, also receives a layer of adhesive on both the front and back. And then both the canvas and the interleaf are allowed to dry and the solvent evaporate, leaving just the adhesive. Steps like trimming off the excess nylon gossamer from the edge of the painting are totally unnecessary except for the fact that they look good. And I like that. I want my work to stand out not just on the front of the painting, but on the sides and the back as well. Once all of the materials have been prepared, I can begin sandwiching the painting together. And I'll add a layer of adhesive film onto the new Belgian linen canvas. Then I'll put the PET film, the interleaf down, and then the original canvas. And this sandwich or assembly goes back to the hot table, gets rewrapped in webbing, which will allow me to extract the air from this envelope that I create with a new piece of Mylar or PET film by way of these through bag connectors that attach to my vacuum pump. And then I can turn on the heat and the vacuum, and now we have even downward pressure across the whole painting as the table heats up and activates the adhesive. I'll use a little piece of balsa wood to press over the entire painting. Once the interleafed lining process is complete, I can turn my attention to actually cleaning this painting. And it starts with a neutral organic soap that I mix here in the studio that's designed and tailored to removing the accumulated soot on this painting. Upon first pass, it's pretty clear that this soap is turning brown and gray, and it is picking up some grime. But it's not picking up everything. You can see that little test I made in the lower corner. That's what the painting should look like. And even after working this soap on the surface, the painting isn't fully cleaned. Yes, it looks better and cleaner, but it appears that there's still something on the surface. And it could be varnish, which is what I'm going to remove after I remove all of the accumulated surface grime. The neutral organic soap doesn't cut through the varnish. It will only remove the accumulated grime. And so once I have removed all of this, I then need to use a solvent mixture to remove that natural resin varnish. This is a multi-stage cleaning process, and this ensures that I'm removing only what I want. If the client didn't want the varnish removed for some reason, I could stop after removing the grime and leave the old varnish in place. But that's not what they want. They want this painting fully conserved and restored. So once all of this grime is removed, I will come back with a bunch of cotton balls and start removing that old varnish. And this old varnish is natural resin. It's likely a damar. And these old resins discolor over time. With exposure to ultraviolet light and the environment, they turn yellow or brown. But what I'm seeing here is not much of a change. Yes, some of the varnish is coming off, but the painting is not bright. And that leads me to believe that this painting was once cleaned or attempted to be cleaned and then re-varnished on top of that old grime. This happens quite a lot when people don't know how to accurately remove old surface grime and varnish. They'll simply go over the painting and re-varnish it because it makes it look shiny or more alive. But in fact, what they're doing is trapping in all of that old grime underneath the new varnish. So, using my neutral organic soap once again, I'll come back and do a second pass. And here we can see the painting is finally coming clean. All of that old grime that was underneath that varnish and underneath that newer grime is now finally coming up, and we can start to see all of the colors that the artist intended us to see. With the painting cleaned and still flat, I'll take this opportunity to start filling in the losses. When this canvas was torn, not only did the canvas break, but some of the paint was lost, and there's no way to save that. Even if the owners had collected it, the odds are that it would be impossible to figure out where it went. And so we need to fill in those losses so that we have a surface onto which we can retouch. And this is done using a sculptable, water-based chalk acrylic putty. And once I've laid down a little bit, I will begin sculpting it, because this painting does have a texture, and it's important that I match that texture so that when I do my retouching, it looks accurate. The color matching won't be a problem, but if it's not the right texture, if it's bumpy where it should be smooth, or smooth where it should have impasto, we'll see it, and it will give away all the repair work that I've done, and I don't want that. Once the fill-in medium has dried, I'll come back with a little bit of water and some swabs and just remove the excess. I don't want any of this on the painting, and I'm not simply going to paint over it. I'm only going to be adding paint where the paint is missing. So removing all of this built-up fill-in medium on the sides is critically important. It's not terribly difficult, and using my hands, I can feel if there are any high spots or low spots that need a second pass, or third pass, or fourth. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts to get it right. But I want to spend the time now to get it accurate so that I don't have to come in after I've done retouching, remove my retouching, and do it again. But before I can do any retouching, I have to marry this painting back with its stretcher. And once I've squared up the stretcher and secured it with some nails in the corners, I'll fit the painting on, and then using some tacks, not ring shank nails here, I'll begin securing it. Now, even though this painting is now immobilized because of the interleafed lining, I'm still going to return it to its original stretcher. Not only because that stretcher is part of the painting, it's original, but because if this lining ever does come off and somebody decides to do a soft lining or another type of repair that would require this canvas to be under tension, well, the stretcher will be utilized in that respect. In addition, even though the painting is immobilized, it can still sag. Keep in mind that the tacking edges don't have any interleaf on them, and they will expand and contract, and over time they may get some slack. And so having them on a stretcher allows the owners or next conservator to key it out or add tension, which will take up that little slack. Once the painting is fully attached, I'll cut off all of the excess. The lining canvas is always oversized so that I can trim it down to fit. It's much, much easier to trim it afterwards than it is to try to get it accurate before. And then I'll tidy up the back. And this is probably one of my favorite things to do in the studio. Just taking care of all the little things that people may not see, like that little piece of thread. And then in go the keys. Like I said, even though they're not critically important, they belong in this painting and they may play a role in the future. And so I don't want them to get lost. Hence the tying of them in place with a little bit of fishing line. And though this fishing line is susceptible to UV degradation, because it will be hidden from light facing the wall, I'm not terribly concerned about it breaking down. And if it does, it can always be replaced in the future. Whenever a painting has a massive tear like this and there's a lot of fill-in, I like to put down an isolation layer of synthetic resin before doing any retouching. And this does a couple of things. One, it accurately represents the painting as it will look once the final varnish is on. You can see the colors getting a little bit denser and a little bit richer, which means that I will be retouching to what the painting will look like, not what it does look like. So my retouching will be more accurate. But it also helps fill in some of the little divots and the edges of where the fill-in medium meets the original paint. Sometimes removing the fill-in medium results in a little divot or a little high spot, and that thicker synthetic resin will help soften those edges so that it doesn't catch the light. And now on to retouching. And this is actually a really fun one to retouch. It's a loosely painted painting. It's not terribly tight, and there are a lot of colors on the canvas, which mean that it's a little bit easier for me to retouch. The colors are constantly shifting and changing, and so slight deviations here and there. If the cream color is a little warm or a little cooler, it doesn't stand out as much as it would if this were a flat color field or a hyper-realistic portrait. Those are much, much harder. In addition, this painting has a lot of areas where the artist thinly painted it and some of the ground is showing through, so that gives me a larger margin of error to accurately retouch. And that means that this is going to go much, much quicker than if it were something really minimal or super complicated. And for me, that's great. I spend so much time retouching that having a piece that works with me instead of fighting me is a welcome change in the studio. After about 2.5 hours of retouching, I'm ready to apply the final varnish. And this is going to go on with my spray gun because I want to achieve a different look than if I were to brush it on. I want it to be a little bit glittery. So after applying the first layer of synthetic resin, which is UV stabilized so it won't discolor and fully reversible, I'll raise the gun up about 18 inches or so and spray from that height and allow some of that resin to dry in the air and land as crystals on the surface, where it will give me a really beautiful effect. What was once representative of childhood lost, memories tainted, and relationships bruised has now been fully conserved and all of the damage removed. The owners of this painting can now return it to the wall, where it will stand as a testament to those memories, the relationships they had with their grandparents, and hopefully begin a new cycle, building relationships and storing memories for generations to come. All of the tears have been addressed, the painting has been cleaned, and it looks great. And even from a raking light, it is almost impossible to see where this painting was torn. The canvas mended, the impasto accurately recreated, and the retouching completely blending in with the surrounding paint. This was no easy feat, but one that was necessary, for any deviation would give away all of the work and break the illusion. And with the painting finally clean, we can see all of the figures, we can see the colors, and we can see what the artist wanted us to see. And so I'm satisfied to say that those tears have been mended and those tears finally wiped away.